Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dan. I'm on the Buildxact customer success team, so I do onboarding with clients, among other things. I'm going to be running you through this Getting Started webinar and covering what we need to get through to give you a solid base knowledge on Buildxact function, how to get your account set up, how to do some basic takeoffs, get a quote together. Where the goal of this session is to really cover as much as you would need to know to be dangerous. And then following this, you're naturally going to learn more, and we're going to chat more with you and have more interaction. But yeah, this is just to get the ball rolling. As far as agenda, kind of covered this a little bit already, but first up, I'm going to talk about getting your Buildxact account set up. I'm then going to have a look at tax, which is no one's favorite thing, but it's necessary. We're going to have a look at how you can connect with suppliers, get your estimates started. We're going to load some plans, do a couple of the takeoffs. And by the end of it, the goal is to be looking at what a client would be seeing for your quote. Now, one thing that I should definitely mention, down the bottom of your screen somewhere, you'll have a Q&A button. So as we're going through, ask whatever you need to ask. You can't chat verbally to me, but put the questions in there. I keep an eye on the question log as we go through. So I'll answer questions as they come up. And if there's questions left over at the end, I'll generally try and follow up with people to, if they're really curly questions, I might even get a specific time with you and chat to you about it. Awesome. So I'm going to flick over to my Buildxact account here. Hopefully you can see that all right. And this account is set up to look like an entry Buildxact account, so it should look much like yours. First thing I want to get through is just a quick run through of the menu options, and then we're going to go into some of the setup items. So when you first start navigating, the main menu is all down the left. Estimates is the largest part, and you're going to spend most of your time in there. Clients and contacts are just address books, and as we go through in various places, we'll have the ability to add to them automatically. So for example, clients, every time you add an estimate, it'll ask who the client is, and if you tell us it's someone new, we actually just fill out the client's book for you. Things like communications, think of that like a sent folder. It's just showing all the quotes and communications we've sent out to people. Catalogs, I'll talk more about it, but the short version is we have this idea of a price library where you can use catalog items from either the Home Depot, which is one of my next points, or you can load catalogs from other suppliers. So in fact, while I'm going through here, let's just take a special mention to the integrations. Now, if you're in the US and you're on any of our plans, doesn't really matter which one, you can connect to the Home Depot. And what this means is that you can have live pricing for your region, and then you can also tell us, hey, sync this pricing up with my Home Depot Pro Extra account, and we can pull the actual store-based price for you. Definitely worth doing. If you don't have a Pro Extra account, jump online, Google Pro Extra account, and you can create one. I did one in about 20 seconds. So create one, and it'll just want to know your ID. It'll go through and you send a one-time code to your phone to verify you are you, and it then requests the connection from Home Depot, who get back to you. Definitely recommended, as mentioned. Doesn't really matter what plan you're on. There's a million benefits to having this connected. Back into the My Business section, I'm going to run through some of the setup items. So first of all, very general. If you go My Business account, it's going to pop up to this screen. For a lot of accounts, this is going to be pretty empty because it's starting from not much. This is one of the first things I recommend people to do. Adding things like your business name and your address, time zones, may not necessarily be correct out of the box, so check that. You can even do things like, hey, do you want the metric system as well as the imperial system? That's more geared to Canadians who have have reason to sometimes use metric, but regardless of where you are, you can use either or both. The reason it's important to set this up is all our quotes, documents, etc. reference logos and emails and things from this screen. Getting it right first up means that a lot of that's, when you come to do the documents, a lot of it's already done for you. Other quick point here is, depending on your account, you'll have a particular number of user seats. Even if you max out that number of seats, so you can see I've got 4 seats on my account. Even if you max that out, you can continue to add and it just charges you money for extra people. Main takeaway here is if there's several people working in the business, it's worth each of them having their own login. Awesome. As a reminder, any questions, shout out and I'll get back to you. Let's keep moving. However, I'm going to talk about tax, which I mentioned is no one's favorite thing, but it's got to be done. First thing I recommend is, if you Google, let's just say you're in Austin, Texas. If you Google Austin, Texas sales tax handbook, there's a service that I use quite a lot, which just tells you what the sales tax rate is in your area. It's particularly good if you are in somewhere like California, where the tax actually changes county to county or even city to city. So it's just worth knowing what your taxes are in your region. And then as far as getting this set up, what we're trying to do is set up the tax for the most common type of job you're going to do. So again, using, say, Austin, Texas, the tax rates around Austin City, pretty much the same. So we would want to, if that was where you were based, set the taxes for Austin. And then in the chance you do a job in, say, San Antonio or Dallas, each estimate can have the tax customized for it. So think of this just as the general tax, and then we'll focus on the specific estimate tax later. Options on how to do this. So there's a couple of options here. In fact, I should just explain the 2 distinct sections. So if you look at this top section, this is all to do with what we call income tax. This is different to your personal income tax or business income tax. This is tax that we apply to estimates or change orders or anything, because we consider that to be the thing that will then later produce income. The bottom section, if I can do this without it, there we go. The expense section, if you're on an entry plan, actually isn't even relevant for you at this point. And I would just tell you to mirror or do the same in the bottom half as you do in the income top half. If you're on a pro or teams account, expense will relate to when you make a purchase, or tell Buildxact about a purchase. How do we handle the tax in that scenario? Now, how do people commonly do this? So a couple of different options. I'm looking now at these material, labor, equipment, etc. types. This means that, hey, when I'm doing an estimate, if it's a material item, right now it's adding the federal and state tax to get to 8.5%. You might have a scenario where you go, hey, federal tax isn't a thing for me. I have a county tax of 1%, and I want that to apply with the state tax to materials, to say equipment. And then I've selected here to use this exempt or zero line for the subcontractors and the labor. The reason I might do this is, hey, Buildxact, when I put an item in and I say it's internal labor, don't add tax to it. Or if it's a subcontractor, I'm just going to put in their total figure, don't add tax to that. It really is just trying to work out where exactly we need to add extra tax. And it may not be for every item type. Lucky last on this, if you go, hey, Buildxact, look, I'm in either like Oregon or Delaware or a state that doesn't have tax, or secondly, maybe Buildxact, I just don't want you to think about tax. I just want to put in figures, not considering that, and then I want to put in the prices tax inclusive and don't add anything else on top. You can just zero this all out. So it's very much personal preference, and also depends on the region you're in as to whether you have sales tax at all. If you have questions on that, you can absolutely reach out to us. So good time to mention that there's a need help section, and you can reach out to my team, the support team, and if it actually goes to a few different teams, ask us questions. We're here to help. The main probably point here is that we want to make sure you get success out of using Buildxact, and whatever questions you need to ask to do that, then shoot them our way. Awesome. Now that we've knocked that over, let's go into estimates, and I'm going to talk through how to start an estimate. So I'm going to go estimates and create new, and you will notice it has a whole bunch of estimate templates, as we call them. Best way to think about this is it's trying to work out what job type you're doing. And if you tell us it's a remodel, it'll have categories and items relevant to a remodel, versus a single story would have things in addition, like the footings and the roofing and the siding, that wouldn't be in a remodel. If in doubt, go the biggest one, because I think it's easier to remove things versus adding. And hence, for that reason, I kind of lean towards the single story one for most job types, and then just remove stuff I don't want. A bonus point here is as you get better and better at using Buildxact, you can absolutely have your own templates. Two tips that I commonly tell people about here: as you're getting started, you can copy quote to quote. So let's say that you do a remodel for a bathroom and then you need to do a very similar one. In early days, I would suggest people use this blue copy button and literally just clone it, giving it a new client name and selecting which pieces they want specifically into the new estimate. I kind of think doing that initially is easier. And then once you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm pretty confident I know what my ideal quote should look like, you would go into that ideal quote, you would go create template, and it will just then create a template under the estimate section. Once that's a good think about it, it'll create a template under here, and you'll notice it's unlocked, it's yours. You can go in, change it, refine it, make it better. That would then show up on the new estimate screen along with our standard templates. But that aside, let's actually go and make one. So I'm going to go create estimate, live price, single story, and I'm going to say this is just Dan's house. I'll say Dan's, we'll go Dan's house. Tell us what type of project it is. Importantly, tell us where it is. Austin, Texas, and it'll try and it'll localize to where you are. So if you're in the US, it'll try and give you US addresses first, versus Canada, same deal. And I'm going to say this is Dan from Buildxact. Create. So what that's going to do is push us into the estimate, and then we have 5, 6 main sections to get through. I generally work left to right. So just a quick run through, and then we'll dive in more detail. Estimate details is all the generic info type of thing. A lot of it will be pre-filled, but things like who's the client, where's the job site. Note that we can have a client address that's different to the job site in the case that we want to record both. Going on down, I also recommend using this for notes. So it could be something as simple as, hey, on the site walkthrough, we noticed there's some water damage. We're going to have to consider removing all the drywall as part of this. Whatever you want. I find, personally, I'm kind of forgetful. I like to write stuff down and remind future me of what I was thinking in the past. Documents, same thing. Dump in whatever document you want. This could be permits, it could be subcontractor quotes, it could be anything. And if you do it, I personally try and folderize, if that's a word, organize into folders the different items I'm putting in. so that I have images separate to quotes, separate to selections, separate to whatever. Plans and takeoffs. We'll come right back to this. This will be our next main stop, but this is where plans go in. And as we do takeoffs through the costing screen, which is the tab after this, as we do the takeoffs there, they list out here. So we keep a long record of all the measurements and takeoffs we've done. Estimate costings is the heart of most of your quotes, or all of them, in fact. And this is where we're putting in prices, customizing the categories, etc. Specifications relates to how you want to present it to the client. You've really got the choice of saying, just make my quote based on estimate costings, and whatever I put there, show them, and then I'll choose if I want to show prices or no prices or whatever. Specifications gives you the more custom option of saying, no, I really want to, write this out in a customer kind of friendly way and put some scope of work in here, add some images. It's there as an option. And when we get to the quote letter, I'll try and point out the differences between specs versus just relying on the costings. Schedule in the entry plan is just here to say, hey, if you upgrade, we have schedules, or schedules, as you say in the US. As you can tell, I'm not American. I'm based in Canada, but I don't have a North American accent. So with this, I'm not really going to talk too much about it other than to say on the next plan up, which is the Pro, you'd be expanding into having schedules as well as being able to manage jobs. And this screen will just tell you about what some of that ability is. Quote letter, this will be our final stop. This is us actually spitting out the quote, working out which sections we want, figuring some of that stuff out and exporting it, printing it, sharing it, etc. to the client. Right on. Well, I'm going to take a few steps back and go to plans and takeoffs. And you've been pretty quiet so far. So reminder, if you want to ask questions, don't be shy. I won't. I've heard pretty much every question there is to have heard. I'm going to go through, load some plans in. So I'm going to say upload a plan here. If you've got it in an email, you can drag the file from an email and just drop it into here and it'll load it. Personally, I mentioned this already, I'm kind of an organized person, so I have folders for plans. And side note, if you have several PDFs, you can put them all in at once. Not that common these days, but here and there you might still get, the plans sent to you in a manner of where one page is one file and you've got 20 files. In that case, this is great. You can just bulk merge them. Open. You have the option to say, choose which pages to import. I find I don't really use that, but it is useful if you were, let's say you're an electrician or a plumber and you get a whole house set of plans. You may only need specific pages, and that's where that's kind of useful. Personally, I load everything and delete things. That's just the way I'm wired, but you're going to find the more you get into this, there's a few ways to manage the same action or do the same thing. It's going to say, great, plans are in. Do you want to scale them now? I almost always go confirm unless I want to cancel and add more files and then scale them all, but almost always it's confirmed. And then the job to be done here is I want to be working out which pages I want, making sure they're up the right way, so rotating, deleting as needed. Personally, and you're probably going to get this theme a lot, that I try to be really organized. I rename plans. And that's mainly so that as I'm scrolling through them later, I don't get frustrated because I go, oh, geez, I thought page 4 was the elevation, it's actually page 6. Especially if I'm a bit worn out after a day already, it's just one extra thing I can avoid. So name them as you need. And then to actually scale them, we want to look what the architect has given us, if it was architect drawn. I should make a point here that if you don't have plans at all, you're literally just going to skip this plan section and go straight into estimate costings. So I should have mentioned, this is really just the case where I have plans. In this case, I'm going to say 1/4 inch to 1 foot because that's what they are. I would apply it to everything, but the context here is I've already looked through and I know all but the last page are 1/4 inch to 1 foot. So I would just apply it to everything and then fix one page. This is just saying we trust you. If you tell us it's 1/4 inch to 1, we have no reason not to believe you. So just be careful, make sure you pick the right ones. And yeah, 2 extra points here. Once it's in, I typically do a check, what I call a check measure, which is just to say, if I go, there to there, I'm able to draw out the dimension and see in this little label here if it matches. And what this is great for is just checking that the plans are good. There are some funky cases where maybe you've scanned paper plans or the architect wrote the wrong scale. We're just trying to weed them out. I'll fix this last page and then I'll come back to well, what do you do if they aren't scaled or they're not right? Like, how do you get around it? So I'll quickly just fix this one up to say it's actually an 1/8 to 1 applied to just this page. As always, quick check, there to there. So that's 12. I do it really rough, so if it's off by an inch, I'm not too worried. And then, yeah, lucky last point, if I got a page like this with just dimensions or even something as basic as like maybe it's done on graph paper, I drew it up, how do you deal with it? And the answer is, instead of picking a common scale, you would manually scale it, which is to say, you tell us the dimension lengths and we reverse calculate it to work out the scale. This covers a lot of just quick hand-drawn sketch plans. Even real estate floor plans can be used as long as they're accurate enough. So manually scale, it'll take us through the steps of doing a horizontal line, telling us how long it is. And if it was feet and inches, you would just put the feet and the inches as you'd expect. It does a vertical one just to check the plan is square. And if it's not square, it does factor that in. So technically we could have like a 1/4 inch to 1 foot in one direction and an 1/8 of an inch to 1 foot in the other direction. No architect would ever do that, but if you draw on graph paper, technically that could happen. That's 35 foot 6 inch applied to this plan, and it just says manually done to record that you did it yourself. Once the plans are in, jump out of there. Point to make, because this gets done where people just don't, they're not really knowing the system that well yet. Personally, I do not add takeoffs here. As I've already kind of mentioned earlier, I use the estimate costing screen and then come back to here to just see the takeoffs that it's recording for me. Very few of our users, I think, need to do takeoffs here. The main difference is if I do a takeoff through the takeoff plans and takeoff screen, it is just a measurement. There's no pricing or any context really to it. Hence, what I do is I run through the estimate costings and I look, I go into a category and go edit, and I look for these little takeoff buttons. And then I specifically do a takeoff for that line. I do it this way because it also names it for me. And when I've measured it and I hit accept, it brings the figure back to here. It's just such a clean process. I prefer this a lot over doing takeoffs through the plans and takeoff screen. Now to back up a quick second, these categories and items have come from the template you chose, whether that was your own or our one. You're not stuck into this. You're not stuck with this structure if you don't like it. So you can edit. And pro tip, I never use the edit button. I double click. It does the same thing. You can change the naming. Could be just site clearing, whatever you want. Change it up. Change the items. Don't feel too stuck by the structure we've got. Going on through, let's do takeoffs and just show you an intro to that. Then we'll look at how do we get pricing from different places. And I'll talk about like the pricing assistant, the AI calculator, the Home Depot pricing. But first of all, let's just do the measurement side of it. So for what I'm doing, I'm adding a new line. I could absolutely use this one, but for example's sake, I'm just saying drywall ceilings. Zoom in a bit on that. When I hit takeoff, it does a quick check to see what's in this box. So super common mistake people make is they have it set to each, and then they go to do the takeoff, and it doesn't show them any square footage tools. Another way of saying this is if you're not sure what takeoff you want, leave it blank, hit takeoff, and it'll just tell you all the options. So we have cubic foot, square foot, lineal foot, cubic yards, square yards, lineal yards, and then each, which is just an individual counting kind of tool. I generally start people off with square foot. Once you've mastered that, there's a lot of similarity in the way they all work. So start with one, figure it out, and then move on to other types as you need them. So if I was doing a square foot for the drywall ceiling, I'm going to go, and this you can see pretty quickly why I like naming things. It's just quicker to find. But if I was doing drywall for, let's just say it's a remodel, I'm doing specific rooms, I would pick the shape that I need, which is almost always polygon. Choose the color. I find I can't see the green one that well, so maybe I'm just getting old. I use red and blue. And you can do other things like if it's a pitched surface, you tell us the pitch or the steepness. So in this case, like a vaulted raked ceiling. Or if you're doing takeoffs for say shingles or roofing. Deduction, I'll mention in a second. And this other one I'll mention in a second too. But polygon, click in each corner. So corner 1, corner 2, corner 3, 4. If you need to drag the plane, you can do it at any point by clicking and holding, and it moves the whole image around. Then you let it go and you keep going to the next point and next point and next point. I'm also using the wheel on my mouse to zoom in and out. You can also use this little zoom up here. 2 quick tips. I do everything too quickly and then have to fix it. So assuming you click somewhere you don't want to go, hit escape and it undoes the clicks. So you can unclick as many times as you want by the escape key on your keyboard. Specifically to the polygon, it has no idea when you want to finish. You've got to tell it. So click the green dot and that's what wraps the shape up. We definitely get calls here and there from people saying, I've clicked this shape like 300 times and it's still going. You've got to tell it to finish. Awesome. If I was, just to give you another example, if I was doing the whole building, or to say all the drywall, personally, for a lot of my takeoffs, I don't cut out the walls. But if it's like a different type of bathroom, a different type of drywall in the bathroom, say, I would go around that. Let's say I'm putting waterproof drywall in those wet areas. So I'd go like that. It's 1248 square feet. This is a double-story house. So we've got a stairway in here. And what I would be doing is saying, well, on the lower level, there's no drywall on the ceiling because it's open to the next floor. Hence, I would actually minus out the drywall here, generally. So using this little minus to turn it into a subtraction, not an addition. There, and there. Pro tip, if the shape is gray like this, this button is on. I absolutely forget to turn it off at times and then deduct whole walls. Double check the shape color and the minus in front of it, and you'll pretty quickly pick up if you've done the wrong thing. Now, I won't do too much more here, but just know that you can continue to go between pages. Like it might be a 3-story building and you have to do drywall on each of the stories. you can go between pages and it just holds the value and then adds as you continue to draw. Accept and save drops it back to here. 2 other bonus points, possibly 3 points. I mentioned that it saves the takeoffs as you go, so if you go back to here, you'll notice it's done takeoffs, actually 2, because I hit the takeoff button for 2 different spots. And this is an easy way to view/review any of the takeoffs you've done. Other point is, because we just keep a running list of all the takeoffs, if I was doing this for real and I got down to something like paint, and for argument's sake, I'm just going to change this to interior paint ceiling. I don't need to measure that again. It's a waste of time. I can instead use the calculator, and it shows me a running list of everything I've measured previous. I really try and stress it's a great thing to reuse them. So drywall will almost always be painted. If you've done the floor area, we get people who reuse that for the ceiling area, assuming it's a flat ceiling. If you've measured siding, the wrap underneath it will be the same, even the OSB usually. So try and reuse stuff as much as you can is the short version here. Click the one you want. And another point, haven't shown you this yet, but in the calculator, we can also do things like adding a wastage factor. So this is personal preference. I kind of go with the idea of, if it's breakable or I'm going to do a lot of cuts in it and throw bits out, I add more wastage. Drywall specifically, I don't take out windows and doors. So I call that wastage, but everyone has a bit of a different style of doing this. So on to the next takeoff. Back to drywall again. I'm going to do another one for drywall walls. Noting that for now, I'm not being super specific on what type of drywall it is. I'll get into that when I show you how to search catalogs. But for now, really just to highlight one tool, it gets missed a lot. If I'm doing walls or a vertical surface like tiles, backsplash, retaining walls, probably other things I'm not thinking of, but there's quite a number. You can do that in square feet by using this line height tool, as I call it. I reckon the reason it gets missed a lot is people think a line is a lineal foot measure and hence don't use it in a square foot kind of context. But where you do that, tell us that the height is 9 foot, if that's what it is. And it then becomes just a single line. So line there to there, it does length times 9 foot high to get a square footage. As I'm doing this, I keep the line running by going click, click, stop, start, and then just one click at the end. That takes a bit of practice. You'll get used to it. Other things I do are I try and think space by space because I don't really want to have to be thinking about this is double-sided, this is single-sided. I just kind of wrap the whole inside wall and then it almost accidentally double sides where it needs to. Another bonus point, I find that when I use this line height tool, generally these labels get a bit in the way. So I often hide those labels, and you can show and hide. They're really useful in the case that you want to go and click and change a color or a height or something, or even a name, but they definitely can get in the way. So switch that one off. And as mentioned, for drywall, I just go straight over openings, with the exception of probably floor to ceiling windows. I would exclude them entirely, or garage openings, probably exclude that entirely. But other than that, I'm pretty quick at doing this. Awesome. Again, reminder, any questions, shout out. It's generally that no one wants to be the first one to ask a question, so don't feel shy, ask what you need to know. On the other hand, no questions hopefully mean I'm explaining this pretty clearly. So accept and save, it'll put the figure back in here. Let's now move into markups and how to search for pricing and what all these ANS buttons mean. If you're on a pro plan, you'll have a T button here too. But let's get into the flow on things that we need to cover. So the next question is just, look, how would I find pricing? Where do I pull it from? And the answer is quite a few different places. If you know it off the top of your head, or you're looking at a website, say Home Depot or anywhere else, and you know the price, put in whatever it is, $1.50, and it just starts the quantity times rate calculation. Note that we've got this total price and then what I consider the sell price. We call it quote total, but same thing. The $200-ish difference here is that it's adding tax into it. If I was to go and add markup, either on the line, or I can add markup on the category, or I can even add markup down the bottom. In fact, this is my personal preference. I do estimate level markup, which is this guy down here, mainly because I just like to go 20% and done. But I sometimes like to have things like contingency. We occasionally see people write in things like painful client fee. So with that in mind, the client doesn't see these breakdowns. You might even have like a travel allowance if it's a really regional job, where it's just bumping up everything by a fixed percentage. I do this one because I said it once and I forget about it. But personal preference, as always, as to how you want to do it, whether it be line item, category level, overall, doesn't really make a huge difference. If I click into this again, you'll see it's got the markup built into it now. So the client is effectively paying with tax $24.45, whereas it costs me without tax $17.89. As far as other ways to get pricing, let's have a look at catalogs. So catalogs refers to any catalogs you've got in this catalog area. So a couple of side points. If you connect with Home Depot, their list will show here too. You can create your own catalogs. Little note that we're not really going to talk about assemblies too much. When you're loading this, 99% of the time you want item catalog. So that should be your default one. So yeah, you can create catalogs, even load them from Excel. And if you do that, we've got a template to try and help you with that. I've even had customers grab the template, send it to a rep at their local lumber yard and go, hey, I need my personal pricing at this kind of structure. And then they can load it in. I use the back buttons a little bit, as you may notice. Yeah, I use the back buttons a bit, as you may notice. The only word of caution is it will occasionally pop up and say, hey, don't go, you haven't saved something. Be really conscious of where it tells you haven't saved, because if you don't save it, it's gone. You really just need to be saving as you go. And a little thing just to show you here, you will notice that if I click away into a different category, it actually just auto saves that and tells me it's saved. Down the bottom right, you're going to get green and red, hopefully no red, pop-ups telling you that we've done something. And you don't really need to watch them too closely, but sometimes they're useful as they pop up and it'll warn you about something. So getting to how do I actually pull pricing in? If you've got a catalog item, you can go and search for it, or you'll notice if you go drywall, it'll want to pop up with suggested items. Personally, I don't use this list much, so I've set mine to hide. so it doesn't open every time. I use the browse button instead. And as you go through, it allows you to filter by the different suppliers, Home Depot, sample stuff, etc. And once you find the one you want, just click on it. It adds a little receipt. We technically called it a pill, but I called it a receipt. So called because it's recording for me where that price came from, plus any item codes, etc. that are relevant. Sometimes you'll see little exclamation marks next to this. It's trying to tell you that the price in your estimate doesn't match the price in the catalog. And if that ever happens, it'll have options as to update price. But just know that that can happen. And especially with Home Depot items where they're live or constantly refreshing the price on it. Other quick shout out, Pricing Assistant. I really like this, especially for stuff I'm just not that sure on what I should charge, or if I want to put in a rough figure for something and then get a quote from a subcontractor later. It's good for that. First of all, tell us where you are, because the pricing is adjusted to the region. And personally, I use these categories to search, but you can absolutely just go look drywall and it gives you results. The reason I use the categories is I find this nice and detailed, so I like to go like interior finishes, drywall, flooring, insulation, and just narrow it down that way. And do I want sheets? Do I want screws? What am I looking for? When you land on the one you want, click into it and note that it has the option to include labor or exclude. And if you're including it, worth a check to just see how it's thinking. So it's kind of basing this on someone paid about the $35-ish an hour range, and it's banking on them doing about 80 square foot an hour. It has the option for burden cost, which adds, some people call this on cost, adds the additional cost for insurances, benefits, that kind of stuff. Add to project, and it will ask you where to put it. And that's how you grab an item from the pricing assistant and put it in. Awesome. Now, what have I forgotten? I've touched on markup, touched on searching for items. Again, reminder, if there's any questions, shout out. Let's do the next parts in kind of a bit of a backwards way. What I'm going to do is jump through to the quote letter. If you're on a higher plan, this might say prepare quote instead of quote letter, just because some of the wording's different. But I'm going quote letter, and I want to first of all look at what I've done so far as far as what kind of quote this looks like. And I'm going to do it this way so that I can point out where specific things on the quote are coming from. And that's just the way I prefer to do this. So looking at the quote letter page, it's got, 8 different sections. Think of this as a page, or could be a couple of pages for some of the bigger areas, but think of it as just a page on your quote. And you're able to go through it and go, allowances, I don't need that, turn it off. Or specifications, I want to show that first, grab the little dots and drag them. The order of these boxes and whether they're on or off is really just deciding whether it's in, and if so, where does it sit. As you get more into the weeds of it, if you click on, say, quote items, error saving section entry, interesting. I wonder if this is because I'm logged in, not as me. Anyway, hopefully you never get that pop up for you. Though that is a good indicator of what the red ones look like. If you do get an error and you're concerned about it and you want to ask, that's a great time to reach out to the support team and go. And if you do reach out to our team, just as a courtesy for them and for us, the more detail you can give us, the better. So if you've got an error, things like, hey, it's in this quote, the error said this. It just takes up extra time if we're going back and forth a lot to ask which job, what item. Try and be specific if you could, please. But yeah, for quoted items, what it's doing so far is taking the items I put in and showing them as categories, I can say, actually look, include the items below it, scroll down, it updates the preview. I might go, hey, I want to be really open book and show all the quantities and everything. Most people don't do this, except for say insurance work, but you can choose just how much you show. I quite like the idea of, and again, everyone's different, but I go with the idea that the more info you give, the more people will probably pick it apart. So trying to be smart about how you give, how much info you give, um, helps a lot. So for example, you might even just turn the pricing off entirely and just give a list of included items. Now, onto things like specifications, allowances, etc. Let's go back to estimate costings. In the case that I've got an allowance, which in my hypothetical example, I'm going to say allowance for flooring, where I've done the measurement, and I'm cheating, I'm just typing in a measurement here. And I'm literally just giving the client that allowance price, knowing that at some point they're going to select it. I'm going to use this A allowance button. And as I do it, watch this customer price drop. So I go A and it drops to 8,000. That really makes some people panic initially, understandably. What it's doing is, because we're going to show this as an allowance, we need to be careful on what price we tell the client. So we, for allowance items, remove the markup so that when they see it in their quote, specifically in the allowances section, the client is seeing what I consider the shelf price. So for North America, that price will exclude tax, because if you go to Home Depot, the sticker on the shelf doesn't have tax in it. You're probably all in North America, but other parts of the world like Australia, New Zealand, UK include tax on their stickers. So we just set that to be defaulted to what's most suitable for where you're based. The big question then is, where does the markup go? And you'll be happy to know that the markup still exists, i.e. the total job markup hasn't been affected. It's literally just that we've moved the markup onto other things. And that's what this C, sometimes E, sometimes N button controls. So to run through these, C is the default, and it's saying whatever markup was on this item, spread it across other things in the same category. For what it's worth, C is my preference because I like to keep the markup really local to one section. I don't like to, let's say, if I've got an allowance in flooring, I don't want that markup to push onto, say, cabinetry. Specifically, if I'm going to be showing the total costs for each category. If you're not showing costs to that level of detail, it's much less of a concern. So C for category, E for estimate, N for nah, don't do anything, and you'll see it's returned the markup. I rarely see people do that because in most scenarios, when it's an allowance, you want the client to know the allowance price, not your marked up price. Awesome. Moving on, S for specification. So if you were paying close attention, you would have noticed there's a specifications tab in the quote. S is one of the ways to get stuff in there. So S pushes through to the specifications. Now, there's a number of ways of doing this. So for example, we have users that build up their own set and save preset specifications and then just use them each job and delete what they don't want. We have users that do what I just did, just you pull the S button on a particular thing, and I'm probably not going to tell them about the sewer pipe, but the S button's a really good way of highlighting inclusions. And generally the nitty gritty, like plumbing parts or blocking or joist hangers, you're not going to tell them about that if you're going down the specifications route. So come through here, it's started to make the list. The locks mean it came from the estimate, you can't mess with it. but you can absolutely add or even custom build your own. And like, in fact, a better example would be add category. I'm going to say appliances, add item. So I just use this little drop down arrow to pop that item button up. And oven. I'm doing this for a very specific reason, which is that I want to show you can add images to this. So for me, I'm just pulling it off, pulling from somewhere I've saved. A bonus point, which I should definitely highlight, because I mentioned how useful the Home Depot stuff is. If you are using a Home Depot item, their price catalogs come with all the images in it already. So hitting S will bring not only the description, but also the image through to this screen. So it's actually really easy. You don't have to load it yourself. It's just pre-built. Another quick point, and then I'll get back to the specifications. One thing I totally forgot to mention earlier, we have an add with AI function. It's only available once you connect to the Home Depot, and it works in such a way where you go drywall per square foot, include tape and mud and screws, and it goes and calculates the amount of material for those items for the size of area you give us, and it links it back to Home Depot price items. So you won't have it unless you connect with them. Even if you don't, you can watch the video on how it works. But I think this is a good reason to connect with them, if for nothing else. So back to specifications, I can customize it however I want. Shout out to the fact that a lot of people put exclusions in here as well, because it's a nice way to say, look, hey client, if it's not listed here, it's not included, but I want to specifically say that you're buying this and you're buying this. We're not budgeting for it. And if I go and either click here and scroll through, I'll be able to see the whole quote. What I'm going to do, and what I generally do more commonly, is export. So I'm just going to show you what this total quote looks like. Adds a few final points in and answer any questions if any do pop up. And that will be us for today. So I want to export and view. And this is my PDF quote. So as I run through it, I'll add some extra points. And if any questions come up, obviously sing out. But front page, I didn't mention this. You can change these images under the cover letter or cover page option. It's automatically got your logo and the name and the location of the job. It's got a cover letter, which I did not mess with at all, but you can absolutely change them. Going on down, first for me is the quoted items, and I didn't put any prices in here. I also used specifications, which is the next page down. So just a point to say that it's not, depending on your preference, it's not usual that people will have both quoted items and specifications. The only time I've seen people do it is where they use specifications for the descriptive elements and then use quoted items to show the total cost per category. Just know that we've got a lot of flexibility and you can build it really however you want. I'm just trying to give some sense of like what most people do. Into specs, you can have reference numbers if you want. Like I really like that, but you can also change these to dot points if you prefer. The reason I like the reference numbers is someone calls up and goes, I've got a lot of questions about your quote. You can go, hang tight, which item are you talking about? And this is a good little reference to make sure you speak in the same language. Allowances, talked all about that. You can change the wording here. However, I really like this. I think it's clear about what an allowance is. Going on down, quote summary, and it's going to highlight the tax built into this quote. I wouldn't say quite commonly, but semi-commonly here and there, we'll see people add verbiage to here to say, please note that the tax included is us factoring in the tax on purchase for materials. It's not us physically taxing you. And we do actually have a way to hide the tax completely if you don't want to talk about it. There's a lot of options with these quotes. Terms and conditions, I didn't mess with that at all, but you would likely have your standard conditions, quote valid for this many days. If it's not here, it's not included. If you wait more than 30 days to get back to us, we'll need to revise the pricing because material prices change. Whatever you want. We even have some users that add signature panels here to get the client to physically sign or even DocuSign this. Last page, change the image. It's got all of your standard info. You can choose how much gets shown, but that hopefully gives you a good sense of what our quotes are about. Lucky last 2 points. If you build the world's best quote, you can preset layouts, which means that you can preset my remodel style quote or my addition style quote or my commercial work quote. Just means you can stylize it and it remembers what each of the settings were. And then lucky last point, share is just email, but it has options around, do we need them to digitally accept it or just deliver it? What attachments do we want to put on? What wording should be on the quote? You can change a whole bunch of that. Awesome. Well, that's just before the hour mark. Hopefully that's been useful. Hope you've learned a lot. As mentioned, we're absolutely here to help you. So you can reach out to us, ideally via the Need Help button, and ask questions. If you want to look into some of the other videos we've got and other resources we've got, you can use the search help guides option. You can even book time with our training team. So again, main emphasis is we want this sessions to get you up and running. Anything that you need to know to make yourself successful beyond that, reach out, let us know. We are 100% here to help you. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for where I find my thank you slide. I don't know where it is. Thanks so much for showing up, everyone. Hopefully it's been useful. And like I said, reach out with any questions. Have a good rest of your day. We'll talk to you in the next one.